Hi, I'm Ariam, and I recently read The Art of Loving by Erich Fromm. This is a philosophy book about the idea of what love is and what it means to love. Now, I really want to work on looking deeper into nonfiction philosophical stuff like this, so I marked a bunch of quotes, and I really just want in this video to look through the quotes and see why I marked them. So we're going to do that until the alarm rings for my food to be ready, which it doesn't mean it's going to be ready because I was going to make deviled eggs, but someone ate my hard-boiled eggs, but that's fine. You know why? Because first of all, I accidentally overboiled them, and secondly, they're cold and I prefer hot deviled eggs. So let's go. Okay. So so there was the foreword, and then there was chapter 1, and I already marked something on that. So it says, most people see the problem of love primarily as that of being loved, rather than that of loving, of one's capacity to love. Hence the problem to them is how to be loved, how to be lovable. So yeah, that really did stand out to me because I think it is how we talk about today a lot of the time, and I think a lot of people also talk about that when people can say this very meanly, but they'll say like to people who don't have a lot of self-confidence or don't have a lot of self-love, they'll be like, well, if you can't love yourself, no one's going to love you. Now, that's not true, and it's a very mean way of putting it, but it is true that we do tend to think of how can I be loved rather than how can I love others. And it is true that if you love others, a lot of times that will lead to you being loved by others. And also that loving others will generally make you happier, the same way that being loved does. Okay. Then the next quote is on basically the next page. It says, in fact, they take the intensity of this infatuation, this being crazy about each other, for proof of the intensity of their love. Well, it may only prove the degree of their preceding loneliness. So there were two things about this. One, it really actually talked to me about, like, I hate instant love in books. I know a lot of people do. Yeah, it really makes it more obvious why I hate instant love in books, because the infatuation, I'll often call it lust. That's what he talks about it too. He says this miracle of sudden intimacy is often facilitated if it is combined with or initiated by sexual attraction and consummation. So yeah, that's what I'll often say. It's lust and not love. They didn't have time to love each other yet. And that's fine, but if the whole romance in a book is built on that, it's super bad, in my opinion, because, as he said, the amount of lust isn't really the amount of love. And then the last part, while it may only prove the degree of their preceding loneliness, also stood out to me because, like, of course, if you were very lonely and suddenly someone loved you, and, like, you felt this sudden intimacy with someone, it's going to feel even stronger, and you may mistake that for more than it is. And I think that's more often seen as bad in books than just the regular insta-love. Okay. More talking about loneliness is in this quote. The deepest need of man, then, is the need to overcome his separateness, to leave the prison of his aloneness. The absolute failure to achieve this aim means insanity, because the panic of complete isolation can be overcome only by such a radical withdrawal from the world outside that the feeling of separation disappears, because the world outside from which one is separated has disappeared. Now, look, I don't really agree with his definition of insanity. Yeah, it's not, this was published in 1956, it's not the 60s anymore. We know more, we know a lot more about insanity, but basically, it did stand out to me that idea of, we know that social isolation is bad for people, that babies, even if they have caretakers, if they're not touched enough, they won't develop properly, And even in adults, social isolation is incredibly harmful and is actually a form of torture. So yeah, it stood out to me, this idea that and social isolation can lead to madness. That, though, to, like, defend yourself from social isolation, you might try to become the world. That's a very curious idea, I thought. Okay. Oh, this one is a little different because this quote is political. And it says, if I'm like everybody else, I have no feelings or thoughts which make me different. If I conform and custom, dress ideas to the pattern of the group, I'm saved from the frightening experience of aloneness. The dictatorial systems use threats and terror to induce conformity. The democratic countries suggest it in propaganda. There is indeed one great difference between the two systems. In the democracies, nonconformity is possible, and a fact by no means entirely absent. In the totalitarian systems, only a few unusual heroes and martyrs can be expected to refuse obedience. So this quote is more about like how people, again, they don't want to be alone, so they'll conform to the world around them. That's not what I so care about there. I care about the division between democracy and dictatorships, because I feel like it's maybe just what I see in the internet, and the internet is people who are extremists, but that Americans, and not only Americans, a lot of people have lost the ability to differentiate anymore, the fact that they actually do have civil rights and they can choose. Now, look, what just happened in America with Jimmy Kimmel? I hate Jimmy Kimmel, but it shouldn't have happened. Yeah, that's against democracy. But I feel like people will still don't view properly the difference between a democracy and a dictatorship. Okay. Here's another quote I thought was interesting. It's just a small quote in a larger idea that comes back again and again in this book, but here it is. The worker becomes an appendix to the machine or to the bureaucratic organization. He ceases to be he. Hence, no union takes place beyond that of conformity. So basically here, this quote is part of his discussion about the fact that people need to be part of a society. Oh, look, you can see it gets stale. But they also need to be individuals. And he says that to be individuals, to truly be individuals, you have to make something, right? So basically he says, he has this criticism that people are becoming part of organizations, which is fine because it's part of a society and it's part of not being alone, but they're putting all of their making stuff into that organization too. And that's basically what he's saying here. Hence, no union takes place beyond that of conformity. That there's only the social conformative output and not the individual output. And he says that's what stops people from really understanding themselves, because basically he says that in order to have true love, you first need to understand yourself. That comes at the very end of this book, but that's what he says. So he says that stopping the fact that people aren't putting out individual output is stopping them from understanding themselves, which is eventually stopping them from loving each other. Now, I don't agree with this, actually, because I think, there are jobs and there are jobs, right? But I think that if you go to a job that truly you have meaning in it, it has meaning to you, even if you're not doing individual output stuff on your own, I still think that the fact that it has meaning to you is an individual output. Right, you're part of an organization, but you're part of this organization as an individual and not just because it's a job. But at the same time, I do feel it. That's a job that I currently have and that has meaning to me. And I'm switching to a job that also has meaning to me. I'm a bit nervous about it, but I'm almost excited. Because off the shim, it will all be good. But at the same time, I do feel this. If I do not put out stuff of myself outside my job, I will go crazy. Whether that is looking at this and going and diving deep into philosophy, if it's really thinking about stuff, if it's drawing, if it's writing, if it's finding out new ways to exercise, challenging myself in that way, I need something other than my job. However, I do not think it's because of the fact that I'm part of society, my job. I think that it's the fact that we as humans need more than one way of output. I think, I've been told that I'm a person who needs more output than most people. I had a very interesting conversation about it like a few years ago. And it's really stuck in my head where I was like talking enthusiastically about art to someone. She was like, "You really like art, don't you?" I was like, "Yeah." And she was like, "No, I mean you really like art. Like you would not be happy without it." I was like, "Wait, yeah, but isn't that everyone?" Um, but and yeah, so she was the one who told me that. I don't know if it's true, if it's just she's different and or maybe she was just putting out more individual output in her life than she saw and she didn't realize. And like it was more settled in her case, whereas I'm a very loud person. Anyways, enough talking about me. Yeah, I just think that humans need more than one type of output. So if you're only doing it your job, of course, if you don't have meaning in it, it's not going to be good. But even if you do have meaning in it, you're still going to need more because that's how humans are. They need more than one output. So yeah, I disagree with him here. Okay, moving on to the next quote. In contrast to symbiotic union, mature love is union under the condition of preserving one's integrity, one's individuality. Okay, I'm going to break this quote into two. Love is an active power in man, a power which breaks through the walls, which separate man from his fellow men, which unites him with others. Love makes him overcome the sense of isolation and separateness. Yet it permits him to be himself, to remain his integrity. In love, the paradox occurs that two beings become one and yet remain two. So, I want to point out two things in here in this quote. So, first of all, he talks about development, child development throughout this book of how children love and how they develop love. And again, I disagree with him, but the idea is that he is putting forth the idea of a development of love, where you are in the beginning, you are just being loved, and then you slowly learn to love others. And the more you mature and the more you begin to know yourself better, the more you can love on a truly deep level. So that's what he's talking about here. Basically, he says that the most base form of love is symbiotic. You love because you are loved. And so there's no individualism there. You're just the product of someone loving you. And then basically he says, but as you grow older, you become an individual, and through being an individual, you love others. Now that's less important. that was actually good for me to just think about it and phrase that. But the part that I really liked here, I guess, is love is an active power in man, in that it's a choice to love. And not only is it a choice, according to him, it's something you have to practice, you know? And I do agree. Not like you I don't think everybody necessarily has to like actively say, "Oh, I'm going to go out and love people today." But I do think that though, because in some ways you do. Like if someone like I don't know how to say this in English. In Hebrew, we have a saying, "Ladun lekaf which is basically to judge to the scale of virtue, I guess. Like it basically says to assume that if a stranger or even or somebody you know as well, like does something that to say, oh, there was a reason behind it. Like, let's say you get to work and you see your friend and you say hi, and they're like hi. So you can assume that they're mad at you. You can assume that they just want to be mad at everyone, or you can assume that they're having a bad day. You know, or if the cashier yells at you because you didn't move fast enough. Now that's a very unpleasant experience. I'm not saying you don't have the right to be hurt by it. And I'm not saying you won't be hurt by it. That's a natural feeling. But at the same time, you can say, maybe she's just a bitch. Or you can assume maybe she was also having a really bad day. I don't know. Like, maybe something really, really bad, chas v'chalila, was happening to her, you know? Like, obviously, we'd rather it would not. You would honestly probably rather she was just a bitch at that point. But you can, and that's what I think, and I think that is an active practice of love. I think Erich Fromm would agree with me on that is like actively choosing to practice love. And I think there are many ways in which you can do that, and some are more natural to you and some are less natural to you. And of course, what is natural to you and what is less natural to you depends on who you are, you know? Okay, I think I have like 3 minutes before my alarm rings. Let's see what we can do. Probably just one more quote. Okay, there are 2 quotes on this page. This is just, I'm just going to read it to you. I don't really think I have to say anything more. But not only love does giving mean receiving. The teacher is taught by his students, the actor is stimulated by his audience, the psychoanalyst is cured by his patient, provided they do not treat each other as objects, but are related to each other as genuinely and productively. So again, he's saying, like, you have to actively put in the effort to relate to someone and not treat them as an object and not be just like, this is the person who gives me love, or this is the person who receives my love, this is the person who teaches me, this is the person whom I teach, you know? But that, and in some ways that is very natural, but in that way you do automatically get from the other person the second you stop treating them as an object. I think that's something very natural to do as well. Okay, and then the next quote, again, does not have to be explained. Elements common to all forms of love. These are care, responsibility, respect, and knowledge. And then he goes on for a few pages and elaborates on each one. You know, so, but yeah, I like the idea. So you have care is obvious, respect is obvious, but responsibility and knowledge aren't actually that obvious. You know, like, if you think about it a little, once you say responsibility and knowledge, it does become, maybe to me they're a little less obvious, but like, I think care and respect, I think care is like the most natural one. You know, like automatically if you love someone, that means you care about them. They're almost synonyms. But responsibility, respect, and knowledge are all things you have to work on. Like, and I don't know about you guys, but personally sometimes I'm like, oh my God, I don't want to answer my friend right now. I don't want to feel responsible for them. But let me just finish talking. But there is a responsibility to loving someone and caring about them. And that is something you have to choose. And again, also with respect, you have to choose to respect them, to treat them not as an object. And finally, with knowledge, of course, maybe when you first get to know, that's what we were talking about before with lust and love. To get to love someone, you have to get to know them. Anyways, I'm going to go make my deviled eggs. It's going to be so delicious. See you. Hey, I'm back. I ate my deviled eggs. It was delicious. And I put on a sweater because I'm cold. Now let's get back to Erich Fromm's The Art of Loving. Now, where were we? We were here on page 19. Nope, we finished that page. Thought. Okay. We were here on page 26. If I love the other person, I feel one with him or her, but with him as he is, not as I need him to be as an object for my use. It is clear that respect is possible only if I have achieved independence, if I can stand and walk without needing crutches, without having to dominate and exploit anyone else. So basically, he's repeating this idea that you have to be, that needing someone else as an object, using someone else as an object isn't love. So you have to be independent to really love. Now, I don't think that's true. Do you, Kit Kat? Because let's talk about Kit Kat. Okay, listen. I went to eat. I went to make my hard-boiled eggs, and I came back, and I sat down at my desk because it's warmer in here. So I was eating in here, and he was just sitting by my door, and when I came back and I sat down and he saw I was going to stay, he jumped back in his chair where he's been all day, and he was waiting for me, and he needs me. And I think on a level that Erich Fromm mentions, we all need each other because, as he says, in social isolation, you go crazy. So, yeah, I think he's wrong, but yeah, I think he's wrong. Okay, no buts. Okay, next one. The above state. Okay. While the great popularity of psychology certainly indicates an interest in the knowledge of man, it also betrays the fundamental lack of love in human relations today. Psychological knowledge thus becomes a substitute for full knowledge in the act of love, instead of being a step towards it. So, he said before that knowledge is part of love, and I agreed with him. But here he's basically saying that people get sucked down into the idea of psychology, of basically labeling a person. or maybe he doesn't mean labeling a person because this was published in 1956, but reading it from a perspective of 2025, I would read it as labeling a person, of saying, okay, what are these person's traits and what do they mean, instead of truly getting to know a person, you know? Okay, next. It is a knowledge that we shall never grasp the secret of man and of the universe, but that we can know, nevertheless, in the act of love. I think I should start this quote from further off. The experience of union with man, or religiously speaking with God, is by no means irrational. On the contrary, it is, as Albert Schweitzer has pointed out, the consequence of rationalism, its most daring and radical consequence. It is based on our knowledge of the fundamental and not accidental limitations of our knowledge. It is the knowledge that we shall never grasp the secret of man and of the universe, but that we can know nevertheless in the act of love. Later on in this book, he does speak more about Kabbalah and the idea of the fact that you can never truly know God, you can never truly know the world. And I think we all know that. We've all talked about at one point or another how however much you love a person, however much you try to get to know them, you will never know them truly. And also, you will never know yourself truly on some level, you know? Like, you can know yourself as much as you want, and someone will always be viewing you from a different point of view, and they will know you in a different way that isn't necessarily wrong. It could be that they're viewing you in a totally wrong way, but it also could be that they're viewing you in a right way that's different from, and you're viewing yourself in a right way, and everybody has a different perspective, you know? So you can never truly know a person. I don't think a person can ever actually truly know themselves. And I would say that's true for God, that in Judaism, that is a fundamental thing, that you can never truly know God, and yet we try to know God. And I think this is what Erich Fromm, who is Jewish, by the way, is saying for this too, for love. The act of love is not just knowledge. It is the act of trying to know the person while knowing that you will never truly know the person, but not seeing it, even though you know that you will never truly know the person, you know that it is not irrational. It's not the word I'm looking for, but it's not useless to try to know the other person, and that's an act of love. Okay, next quote. This is one that we talked about before, but I'll just read you the quote because the end of this is nice. Infantile love follows the principle, I love because I am loved. Mature love follows the principle, I am loved because I love. Immature love says, I love you because I need you. Mature love says, I need you because I love you. I just like that last thing, that I love you because I need you. Sorry. Excuse me. Okay, last yellow one. This is when I ran out of the yellow. Then I ran out of the orange, and then I had pink, and I did not run out of the pink. Okay, I nearly ran out of the pink. I had one left. So this is one of the ideas. This next quote, he brings in one of the ideas in this book that I find the most meaningful to me personally. Obviously, everyone's different. You might not necessarily find it meaningful to yourself. For 6 minutes already, damn. Anyways. If I truly love one person, I love all persons. I love the world, I love life. If I can say to somebody else, I love you, I must be able to say, I love you in everybody. I love in you everybody. I love through the world. I love in you also myself. I don't know why this is like, I can't articulate exactly why this idea of loving one person, true love, is loving the whole world, why it's so meaningful to me, but it is. Maybe as we move on through the quotes, we will discover why it's so meaningful to me. Sorry. Where are my tissues? Anyways, I think they're on the bed. Yeah, they're on the bed. Okay. Hope YouTube doesn't ban this video for the next one. Okay. Do you think bad videos? Okay. Erotic love is exclusive, but it loves in the other person all of mankind, all that is alive. It's exclusive only in the sense that I can fuse myself fully and intensely with one person only. Erotic love excludes the love for others only in the sense of erotic fusion, full commitment in all aspects of life, but not in the sense of deep brotherly love. So obviously he said before that with every type of love, no matter who you're loving and what kind of love, you are loving, it is a love towards the whole world. And obviously he has to explain that here because we all know there's erotic love. And obviously it would be horrible to, and this is kind of also, I feel like it's part of his manifesto against Freud. It would be horrible to, like, with some people that you truly, truly love, to use erotic love. So he has to kind of explain it. So then he has this idea of brotherly love. So brotherly love here is not, in this book, it's not about love between siblings. It's basically love for your neighbor. Like it says in the Tanakh, for you shall love your fellow as yourself. Or, as Hillel put it, what is hated upon you, do not do to your fellow. You know? So basically it's a fellowship. Would probably be a better word than brotherly love. But he does want to use the word love, understandably. So basically he is saying that the difference here is that there is a full commitment in all aspects of life, which obviously includes some things otherwise. But he's saying that it's still, the basis of it is still this fellowship with all others, even if the commitment is obviously not the same with all others, and you would not want it to be. I don't know if he convinced you. I don't know if he convinced me. Okay, and here's, again, a quote about a subject we talked about before, so I'll just read it to you. To love somebody is not just a strong feeling. It is a decision. It is a judgment. It is a promise. If love were only feeling, there would be no basis for the promise to love each other forever. A feeling comes and it may go. How can I judge that it will stay forever when my act does not involve judgment and decision? Okay, so actually I'm just going to read the rest of what he wrote to you on the subject because I thought it explained it clarified something to me very well. Because obviously for me, obviously, the second I think about that, I think about arranged marriage. Like, you can choose to love someone in arranged marriage, right? Taking these views into account, one may arrive at the position that love is exclusively an act of will and commitment, and that therefore, fundamentally, it does not matter who the two persons are, whether the marriage was arranged by others or the result of individual choice. Once the marriage is concluded, the act of will should guarantee the continuation of love. This view seems to neglect the paradoxical character of human nature and of erotic love. We are all one, yet every one of us is a unique, unduplicable entity. In our relationships to others, the same paradox is repeated. Inasmuch as we are all one, we can love everybody in the same way as in the sense of brotherly love. But inasmuch as we are all also different, erotic love requires certain specific, highly individual elements which exist between some people but not between all. So basically, yeah, like he said, I really like that idea because, like, I do think arranged marriage is not something I would ever want. Well, maybe if it was to a woman, but like, I don't think it's necessarily always bad. The problem is that nowadays we see arranged marriages generally in child marriages, and that we do realize nowadays that people should have the freedom to choose who they want to marry. On the other hand, I see a lot of people were like, divorced, we don't love each other anymore. And maybe they just don't want to say everything on the internet, but like sometimes it reads to me like, but you have to work to love each other, like you can't, like, love is a repeated thing. It's not just a one-time thing. And you knew that, right? Because to get to the point of marriage, in general, you have to work on the repeating thing. But basically he's saying, yes, in the sense of brotherly love, that you can all love each other in a deep, fundamental level, then yes. But we are all individuals, and we will all relate to each other differently. And so we will love each other. And so on a more practical level, we're going to love each other differently. Which I think is why I like his idea, because I do think that we all have a great capacity for love that is very fundamental. I mean, it's one of the basic emotions, isn't it? Okay. I have more thoughts on it, but I cannot articulate them, so let's move on. Okay. I just basically said this quote, So let's move on to the next quote. Here's a very, very nice quote. If it is a virtue to love my neighbor as a human being, it must be a virtue, and not vice, to love myself, since I am a human being too. There is no cause of a man in which I myself am not included. The idea expressed in the biblical, love thy fellow as thyself, implies a respect for one's integrity and uniqueness. Love for and understanding of one's own self cannot be respected from respect and love and understanding for another individual. The love for my own self is inseparably connected with the love for any other being. I really love the basis for his argument here, that you cannot expect love for others and then say you cannot have self-love, because you cannot accept love for others on the basis of fact that they are human or that they are alive, and then say you can't have self-love when you too are human, you know? I just love that argument. I love the way he built it. And of course, he brought in love thy fellow as thyself. Okay. This next quote. I'm sure I should read it. I will. Love of one person implies love of man as such. The kind of division of labor, as William James calls it, by which one loves one family, but is without feeling for the stranger, is a sign of a basic inability to love. The reason I'm not sure I should read this quote is because the reason I marked it is a conversation I had with a coworker about someone we both know, whom neither of us very much like. We feel that she is very fake, and that she just wants to manipulate and control others. But then when we see her with her children, like, she's not manipulating and controlling them. She truly loves them. Spoils them even. And so I feel like this quote matches her, like, that I'm sure she does love her children on some level, like on a very deep level, you know, not even at some level, on a very deep level. But at the same time, it doesn't, like, I don't want to say it's not true love. I think it is true love, but she doesn't extend that love outwards. And it's odd to see that, you know? Okay, next. These ideas in self-love cannot be summarized better than by quoting Meister Eckhart on this topic. If you love yourself, you love everybody else as you do yourself. As long as you love another person less than you love yourself, you will not really succeed in loving yourself. But if you love all alike, including yourself, you will love them as one person, and that person is both God and man. So, yeah, again, I really like this connection between loving God and man. I think it's something that appeals to me because obviously God is not man, God is not human in any way. And obviously God is hard to understand, harder than any human can be to understand. But, okay. Sorry, I lost my train of thought. But there is, I think a lot of scholars, Torah scholars have talked about this, that you need to start from, in order to love God, you cannot really, when we understand God, when there are when let's say it says in Torah that God turned God's back to Moses, or that God put out God's hand, obviously we know that that's not true, because God does not have form in Judaism. But it is hard for us to understand some God. I want to say something, but that's not the correct word, right? You already see I'm failing for words here. It's very hard for us to understand God because God is so different from anything that we can in our human reality. So we cannot really grasp even the least little idea of God, truly. And so we start from human ideas to try to understand God. And some people take it even further and say that's what we need to do, you know? If you want to try to know God, which is to love God, and this is not an idea that just Erich Fromm says to know is to love, especially when it comes to God. This is a Jewish idea that is known. I'm sure he knew it. I'm pretty sure it says he grew up religious, didn't he? Let me see. It has a little thing at the back. Yes. His grandfather and two grandfathers had been rabbis, and a great-uncle was a noted Talmudic scholar. So his father, Charlie, was a businessman. The family remained devoutly Orthodox. Yeah, so he would have known this, what I'm talking about. So, yeah, to know is to love. So, and because we cannot know God truly as God, we have to try to know God through what we can grasp. You will love them as one person, and that person is both God and man. Thank you, Mr. Erich. Okay. Next quote. Did I skip quite a bit here? Yeah, that was 58, and now we're skipping to 70. But it's, again, the same idea. He is specifically using the Tao, which I am unfamiliar with, so I hope this is truly what it says there and not just made up. We look at it and we do not see it, and we name it the equable. We listen to it and we do not hear it, and we name it the inaudible. We try to grasp it and do not get hold of it, and we name it the subtle. With these three qualities, it cannot be made the subject of a description, and hence we blend them together and obtain the one. He who knows does not care to speak about it. He who is ready to speak about it does not know it. Again, it's this idea of, it's following the same idea of that God is so ungraspable that you cannot truly know God. And to try to describe God in any way is, you will automatically fail. However, this idea of he who knows does not care to speak, he who is ready to speak about it does not know it, it does, in some ways, it does go against Judaism, because Judaism is like, well, you have to try to speak about it to teach other Jews. Yeah, but basically, before that, when it said, we look at it and we do not see it, we name it the equable, which I suppose means the seeable. We listen to it, we do not hear it, we name it the inaudible. We try to grasp it, we do not get a hold of it, and we name it the subtle. Especially that last line, we try to grasp it, not get a hold of it, we name it the subtle. The subtle is such a human concept. You know, God, like when we describe God as being angry, can God really be angry? Anyways, sorry, did not expect to have this much God in this book, but okay. In this video. Thus, paradoxical logic, this is another quote that's just very beautiful. Thus, paradoxical logic leads to the conclusion that the love of God is neither the knowledge of God in thought, nor the thought of one's love of God, but the act of experiencing the oneness with God. Basically, he continues and says that the oneness with God is trying to do the right actions by God, but I'm just going to ignore that part because I just thought that quote was very beautiful. That you cannot truly know God, and because you cannot truly know God, you cannot truly love God in that way, but just you try to experience the oneness with God, which is a very breast love idea, even though I'm not that into breast love, but I do like some breast love ideas. But yeah, but I'm more into trying to know God, even though we know it's useless, but we try. And as I said, it's true for humans too. On a level, we know it's useless to try to know humans. We even know it's useless to really try to know ourselves, but it's important to try. And through more knowledge, we grow in love. Okay. And now, quick switch. We're at page 86, and we are switching to capitalism. Not to postpone the satisfaction of any desire became the main tendency in the sphere of sex, as well as in that of all material consumption. Now, I said in the video where I read this book that in some ways, I feel like he's like complaining about things that are complained about now, and we're complaining about the past, and they're never going to stop being complained about. So I do not think that it's true that this was a change of not postponing any desire, you know? But I do think that it's unhealthy not to postpone any desire. It's something we're all born with, you know? And when you're a baby, it's good because you need to survive. You need to eat when you need to eat. You need to sleep when you need to sleep. That's how you survive as a baby. But as you grow older, we have that very basic survival instinct. But as we grow older, it no longer serves us in the same way, you know? So I do not think it's true that it became new. I think this is something very basic and very human. But that knowing how to defer stuff when it's appropriate is a good thing that not everybody gets to, and that not everybody sees value in, which is the thing that more worries me. But again, I don't think it's a new thing. I don't think it was new in 1956. I don't think it's new now. I don't think it was new in 70 before Common Era, you know? Okay, again, skipping topics. This aspect of mother, the destructive, engulfing one, is the negative aspect of the mother figure. Mother can give life, and she can take life. She is the one to revive and the one to destroy. She can do miracles of love, and nobody can hurt more than she. I like this quote because it did explain to me more like how how you can have like mother figures not in real life, in as symbols, mother figures as symbols that are so terrifying. I think we can understand automatically. Maybe in 200 years, this video will be inexplicable. This part of the video will be inexplicable, but we can understand automatically how a father figure can be terrifying, again, symbolically, not as a real person, and not even as a character in fiction, just a symbol. A symbol of a father figure can be terrifying, but it's much harder for me to understand how a symbol of a mother can be terrifying. And this is basically the idea of creation and destruction are two sides of the same coin. This, and this is another thing about choosing to love. You will see a theme here, not only that he writes about it a lot, but that I like that idea. Love, experienced thus, is a constant challenge. It is not a resting place, but a moving, growing, working together. Even when there is harmony or conflict, joy or sadness, even whether there is harmony or conflict, joy or sadness, is secondary to the fundamental fact that two people experience themselves from the essence of their existence, that they are one with each other by being one with themselves, rather than by fleeing from themselves. Okay. So again, this has two ideas in it that I like. Also that love is work that you have to choose to do, and also that two people experience themselves from the essence of their existence. That love is this fundamental connection from your essence. And he has this idea at the end, rather than by fleeing from themselves, that again, it's his idea that in order to love, you have to know yourself, and you cannot love, and you obviously cannot know yourself, so you cannot love if you try to run away from yourself, from knowing yourself. Okay. And then he has a kind of a cynical thing here. Religion allies itself with autosuggestion and psychotherapy to help man in his business activities. The Power of Positive Thinking by the Reverend N.V. Peel is was a great was it says sorry. Religion allies itself with autosuggestion and psychotherapy to help man in his business activities. In the 20s, one not yet called upon God for the purposes of improving one's personality. The bestseller in the year 1938, Dale Carnegie's How to Win Friends and Influence People, remained on a strictly secular level. What was the function of Carnegie's book at that time is the function of our greatest bestseller today, remember this was published in 1956, The Power of Positive Thinking by Reverend N.V. Peel. In this religious book, it is not even questioned whether our dominant concern with success is in itself in accordance with the spirit of monotheistic religion. On the contrary, the supreme aim is never doubted, but belief in God and prayer is recommended as a means to increase one's ability to be successful. Just as modern psychiatrists recommend happiness of the employee in order to be more appealing to the customers, some ministers recommend love of God to be more successful. Yeah, and that's really true. And again, it's not true for the modern day. Like he says, in the 20s, it wasn't yet. I'm sure in the 20s it was, maybe on a lesser level or maybe on a less public level, but it's always been that way, that people are going to take something that's very important to people and use it to do you hear that sound? That sound is annoying. So annoying, right? Anyways, and use it to be part of the value. It's going to automatically be part of the values of that society. And if the society is to be, the value in that society is to be successful. And I think being successful has always been a very strong value, or at least it's been recently, in the past like 200 years, it's been a very strong value in Western society. So of course they're going to try to, I can't concentrate with that noise, I'm sorry. Of course it's going to become tied, at least with some people, and with a lot of people, with other important things in that society, other important values. But yeah, that last line of the quote that I quoted, not the last line of the paragraph, is quite cynical. Okay. Let's move to the next quote. It is one of the unfortunate aspects of our Western concept of discipline, as of every virtue, that its practice is supposed to be somewhat painful, and only if it is painful can it be good. I really like that because it is something that has annoyed and, more than that, disturbed me for so long, that not only for something to be good for you does it have to be painful, that if something is painful for you, it's automatically good. Like, the place I've seen it most is sport, where, like, and I still see this going on today, and it drives me crazy, where people are like, if it's not hurting you, it's not good for you. You're not exercising enough. And that is simply not true. It's gonna catch up with you sometime or later. You should not be throwing up when you're running. Okay? You should not have muscle pain so severe you cannot move the day after a workout. Like, you need to let your body get used to stuff, okay? You cannot it's like teaching someone to read. If you throw a kid at a kid who's just learning to read, and you say, here's this Judy B. Jones book. If you don't know, it's quite easy chapter books. Read it. They're never going to learn to read. They might kind of struggle along, kind of learn to read, but you need to start from the basics. And that same thing is true for exercise. And you need to listen to your body, and when it's painful, you need to stop. Now, listen, of course there is pain that is okay, that is fine, that is your muscle saying, we're stretching for the first time in a while. Let me just let the cat out. And for me personally, that kind of pain is something that is harder for me to feel just because of, I'm not going to go into it, but I have a condition that makes it harder for me to feel that kind of pain, or realize that I'm feeling that kind of pain. But as I said, I've heard so many people be like, if it's not painful, and that's how I literally hurt myself very badly. If it's not painful, you're not doing it right. And then more than that, I've heard people be like, I threw up, so it was a good run. It was healthy. If I hadn't thrown up, it wouldn't have been a good run. No, absolutely not. And I think people will ignore the fact, and people will lose the ability to differentiate between good pain and bad pain because they're so convinced that every single pain is good, and And that's just in the realm of exercise, which is the one that's touched most of my life. But in general, I feel like that is very much a concept which, unfortunately, is way too strong in our lives. And, okay, let me continue the quote. The East has recognized long ago that which is good for man, for its body and for its soul, must also be agreeable, even though at the beginning some resistances must be overcome. And, okay, that's saying that there can be some stuff that, it's uncomfortable at first, to go out of your comfort zone is healthy, right? But another resistance you have to overcome. It's not always going to be fun and pleasant, but if it's to the point of painful, of ow, whether it's mentally or physically, then at that point, it's not good for you. It's going to catch up to you at some point. Okay, next quote. I was so passionate about that I could concentrate despite the noise coming from the outside. Okay. The fork scraping against the plate. How awful. Okay. To be concentrated in relation to others means primarily to be able to listen, something I'm definitely doing right now. Most people listen to others, or even give advice without really listening. They do not take the other person's talk seriously. They do not take their own answers seriously either. As a result, the talk makes them tired. They're under the illusion that they would be even more tired if they listened with concentration, but the opposite is true. Any activity, if done in a concentrated fashion, makes one more awake, so afterward natural and beneficial tiredness sets in. Well, every unconcentrated activity makes one sleepy. But at the same time, it makes it difficult to fall asleep at the end of the day. Excuse me. So again, I think this is like similar to the idea that we talked about before, that people have trouble differentiating between good tiredness and bad tiredness the same way, because they're like, all tiredness is negative, but everybody knows that there is some tiredness that is just satisfactory, like at the end of a long day, you've really, or like even not at the end of the long day, after you've like really put in effort in something, you feel like the satisfactory tiredness, you know what I mean, of like, I did it, I really put in the effort to it. I think that's what he's talking about. And if you don't put in the effort to something, you might get bored, and we know boredom causes sleepiness. So yeah, that's what he's talking about, I think. Okay, next quote. I'm just gonna leave it here. I think it's understandable. It's getting hot now. How many parents experience a child's reactions in terms of his being obedient, of giving them pleasure, of being a credit to them, and so forth, instead of perceiving or even being interested in what the child feels for and by himself? I think that quote can be left on its own, so let's just move to the next quote, which is the last orange quote, and then we have 4 pink quotes. I must try to see the difference between my picture of a person and his behavior as it is narcissistically distorted, and that person... Two stuff together here? Yeah. And the person's reality as it exists regardless of my interests, needs, and fears. So basically saying that this is part of knowing a person, that you are going to come with your own perspective, but you must try to look objectively at a person. And I think that is also true. But I think it's only true up to a certain level, because there is, in my opinion, there is no true objectivity. So at a certain level, so you do have to try to view a person from beyond yourself, and not always be like there's the level of viewing a person as an object, which you talked about. What does my child do for me? Is my child making life pleasant for me? Are they listening when I tell them? Instead of, is my child cleaning up and learning the skill of cleaning up? Is my child cleaning up and making the room better for me? So, but also there's even if you're not looking at a person as an object anymore, you do have to separate yourself from yourself. From as we talked about before, if someone is looking at you with an angry face, and you can think they're mad at me, or you can think they had a bad day. And so that's trying to see them separately. Of course, you can learn and you can talk to them, whatever. But as I said, I think that there is a fundamental place where it just will stop, because there's a limit of objectivity you can get to in the world. Just as you can never truly know someone, you can also truly never be truly fully objective. And I think that they're two sides of the same coin. Because you cannot be fully objective, then you cannot truly know someone. Therefore, because you cannot truly be objective, therefore you cannot fully know someone. Okay, last 4 quotes. Okay. Unless we have faith in the persistence of ourselves, our feeling of identity is threatened, and we become dependent on other people, whose approval then becomes the basis for our feeling of identity. Only the person who has faith in himself is able to be faithful to others, because only he can be sure that he will be the same at a future time as he is today, and therefore they will feel and act as he now expects to. He does say further that obviously people can change and whatever, and that people are expected to change, but basically, again, this is idea of people of I love you because I need you versus I need you because I love you. And that if you need someone else to tell you who you are, then that is loving because you need them, and not needing them because you love them. Okay, next quote. The opposite of education is manipulation, which is based on the absence of faith in the growth of potentialities, and on the conviction that a child will be right only if the adults put into him what is desirable and suppress what seems to be undesirable. There's no need of faith in the robot, since there's no life in it either. This was a quote that I marked because it was making me think a lot. Because I think everybody has ideas of what children should know and should learn. And I also have ideas of what children should learn, but and that's what I want to know. Where's the line? I've always been very avoidant of telling children stuff. You need to know this, you know? I'm not saying I haven't told children, don't hit, it will hurt other people, don't spread rumors, it will hurt other people. And again, I think those are important things. I think respect and care for other people are important things for a child to learn. So that's my question, where is the line? Where's my line between manipulating a child, not manipulating as in what you generally think of as manipulating? I mean, manipulating as in seeing the child as a piece of clay, which I can turn into whatever I want. I think of God, and helping the child learn. I don't want a child to just go and do whatever they want, You have to help them learn. And there are things that it's going to be important for me to learn. So where is the line, Okay, next line. Next quote. The penultimate one. I love the word penultimate. I learned it from A Series of Unfortunate Events by Lemony Snicket. The second last book is called The Penultimate Peril. Then one will also recognize that when one is consciously afraid of not being loved, the real, so usually unconscious fear is that of loving. To love means to commit oneself without guarantee, to give oneself completely in the hope that our love will produce love in the loved person. Love is an act of faith. And I don't think I really need to continue that. I think it stands on its own. I like it. Okay, last quote. The end, as you may say. Fair enough ethics lend themselves to confusion with the ethics of the Golden Rule. The maxim, to do unto others as you would like them to do unto you, can be interpreted as meaning be fair in your exchange with others, but actually was formulated originally as a more popular version of the biblical love thy fellow as thyself. Indeed, the Jewish-Christian norm of brotherly love is entirely different from fairness ethics. It means to love your neighbor, that is to feel responsible for and one with him. While fairness ethics means not to feel responsible and one, but distant and separate. It means to respect the rights of your neighbor, but not to love him. You get it? I never thought of it that way before, okay? I never thought of it that way before, and it was making me think, obviously, fairness is something we need in the world. I'm not saying it isn't, but basically, and he says the Jewish Christian norm of brotherly love, we do have fairness in the Torah. I was actually reading in the Talmud and Halacha, Jewish law. I was actually reading an article about exactly what it is. Basically, it's literally written in the Torah that you cannot, if you are a judge and you have a rich person against a poor person in court, and the poor person is going to lose, and you know that the right thing is that the poor person loses, you cannot say the rich person loses because it's fairer, and you feel sorry for the poor person because you feel sorry for the poor person. That's what I mean. You may love the poor person and you may love the rich person and be like, well, the poor person needs the money more. But you have to be fair. You have to be righteous and say, actually, the rich person is winning and the poor person has to give the money. And then we have rules around that. You can't. But then we have rules about love around that. If a poor person is so in debt that the only thing they have to give is their clothing, you have to give it back to them during the day. You can't humiliate them. And humiliation is actually, in Talmudic law, is actually something that if you humiliate a person, you have to pay a fine for. kind of similar to defamation, but a different law. It's like, I think the closest we have to it nowadays is defamation, but maybe I'm wrong. Maybe we do have a humiliation law and I just don't know it. But it's specifically about humiliating someone. Also by accident. Like, if you, let's say you were in the, how do you say shuk? Fair, as you call it, and you were fighting with someone, you're already gonna have to pay a fine because if you hurt them. But let's say while you're fighting with them, you accidentally tear off the clothing covering their private parts. You will also have to then pay a fine for their humiliation. So, but anyways, back to my original example. As I said, the law in the Torah is to be, if the poor person is going to lose, you have to say, yeah, like, if that is the just thing, you have to be just, you have to be fair, and you have to say the poor person is losing. But if the poor person is so poor where you're not allowed to humiliate them, and that's the level of loving. So, and he actually comes to the end case that you cannot have a balance. I think that's, well, the Torah does not agree with him. Okay, anyways, that's all. That's the Art of Loving by Erich Fromm. Crazy. I think I will give this a secondhand store, charity shop. Thank you for being here. I bet no one was here, but it was very helpful for me. I really enjoyed it, and it was really nice to think about it more, and also think about the things I agreed with him and things I disagreed with him. And yeah, and I definitely want to read more by him. I think it is very interesting, and I find him quite easy to understand because I feel like he has a similar level of Orthodox education as I do.